And Vino, you can go ahead and get started.
Yeah, sure. Good morning and good evening to everyone, and we welcome you all to this session where we'll be mostly talking about, the Gen AI capabilities within UiPath Document Understanding and across UiPath platform. And this is based on one of the feedback that we received from our previous series where you wanted to know about the Gen AI capabilities used within UiPath Document Understanding. As part of it, I also want to quickly introduce to you all about the New York community that we have. So, uh, so if you have not signed up yet, you can basically sign up to this New York community. We'll be intending to have lot many more sessions across the newer capabilities of UiPath and more with the agentic automation throughout this year. So it is a good chance for you to sign up so that whenever we publish some events, you'll be notified on your email. Okay. And as part of it, we also have, one more session that is coming up, which is more around building the document understanding, which is more about like a practical, like a session where we'll be showing how we can build like a document understanding solution from scratch using like a model-based approach. So with that, coming back to our slide. Okay, so today we have Sharon, who is director of pre-sales within Wonderbots, and she'll be sharing about how we can use the Gen AI capabilities within document understanding. So over to you, Sharon.
Thank you, Wino. Let me very quickly start sharing my screen from here. All right, let's see if we can do that. 1 second. All right. Okay, perfect. You can see my screen, right?
Yeah, like
Okay. Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for joining this session today where we are going to discuss UiPath's capabilities with generative AI. Before I start, I just want to give a big shout out to Dinah Gray. She's the community marketing manager for North America. Dinah is responsible for the entire community of North America, including the North and South American regions. And if you ever want to reach out to her in terms of the community, do anything, she would be your go to person. And I want to thank Vino, too, who is the community leader of New York, for having a collaborative event. So, a little introduction about myself. I know Vino gave an intro to me too. Thank you so much, Vino. I've been in the artificial intelligence space for the last 7 to 8 years. So generative AI is something that's from a business standpoint, we see very much being adapted all the time. So if you are someone in this space, it's always good to know what capabilities are being offered and how we can use that in our existing automations or business processes or whatever it is, right? So that being said, let's go to our next slide. So today it's going to be this session was designed with the intention of someone to understand what Gen AI is and specifically how it can be implemented within UiPath. Because the generative AI term is a little bit broad and it can have so much of possibilities, but it's important to understand how we can start and get there. And also, if you ever have any questions, feel free to add it on chat. And if you want, at the end of the session, we'll have a Q&A. You can unmute yourself and we can have a conversation with the questions that you may have. That being said, let's understand what generative AI is because right now, at least to me, Gen AI feels like a hot term. Whenever you do an automation, if you say, hey, we have an artificial intelligence component to it or a Gen AI component to it, this automatically gives a sense of sophistication or, some kind of I think high complexity towards your automation. I think that has been a buzzword, obviously, for a long time because we see a lot of folks using ChatGPT, which is also a branch of Gen AI. But what is generative AI in its core principle? So if you see here, I think this is a UiPath described terminology where it says generative AI refers to a subset of AI that can generate new content, hence Gen AI, Gen for generative. So unlike traditional AI systems that are designed to perform specific tasks or make predictions, Gen AI can create original outputs. So that was not explicitly programmed into it. So let's see on this little side, you see where Gen AI comes, right? So obviously, artificial intelligence is the discipline of all things, whether it's machine learning, whether it's algorithm based, whether it's context driven. And then generative AI is a subset of machine learning where we can use, different algorithms to generate new context, either by training a model or by something we call zero shot learning, which is not training a model, and we can train it over time. So the possibilities of reinventing the wheel is endless with Gen AI. So when we think about UiPath, now for folks who have been in the UiPath business, UiPath is not new to artificial intelligence or even Gen AI. You can see over here within the RPA process scope, we've come a long way. And this seems, I think it's 2016, 2015, almost 10, 11 years. We started with RPA, low code, getting into document understanding. That was probably the first footprint into generative AI based content. Intelligent document processing, if you have been doing that, there was OCR, data capture, different machine learning models. And then now we're in that Gen AI and LLM space, right? So I'm not going to talk a little deep about document understanding because today's session is for Gen AI. But for those you know that document understanding has a hardcore capability offering with Gen AI, which we will discuss, right? So how does Gen AI work? Now, I told before that Gen AI, we can either, use a trained model, which is called supervised learning, because we supervise the model by training known data and train the model to a specific context. Or we can use unsupervised learning, which is what generally is used. So generative AI is, you can obviously use unsupervised learning. So whenever you use something like ChatGPT, that is considered unsupervised learning. Why? Because you're using an already created model. Like GPT-5, GPT-6, you see all of those new models coming or rolling out daily by OpenAI. So that we consider as unsupervised learning because that's trained on large data and you're just calling from it. But when you want to retrain that data, that would be a separate branch, and we'll discuss that later. That would also be a capability within Gen AI, right? Now, for the fun part of how UiPath marries generative AI into its workflow. So, for those who have used UiPath, you can see right now we are at I want to say an advanced phase of Gen AI adaptation and implementation. We started off with, these capabilities and core offerings like chat generation, email, text, PII filtering, and all of these capability offerings. But now it's getting a little bit more sophisticated where generative AI is being adapted into the larger disciplines of UiPath's offering. You can see here, UiPath is platform agnostic. What that means is you can use any of the open source hyperscaler generative AI offerings within UiPath, and it's supported by UiPath. For example, if we take Microsoft, Microsoft has their Azure OpenAI endpoints. You can use that with generative AI activities within UiPath. And the same context goes to OpenAI, AWS, Google Cloud, all of these resources that you see here. And now the progress is that Gen AI is part and parcel of all of these activities that you see here, right? So that from a capability standpoint, this would be the core offerings that UiPath has now with generative AI offerings. And we call it with an umbrella term of specialized AI, right? So, a little bit about the document understanding space. I want to touch a little bit about this because of IXP. Now, you may or may not know what IXP is, but IXP is, in my opinion, the new and much more sophisticated automation platform to specifically extract complex documents. And when I say complex, let's think about all of the unstructured documents that previously took so much time and effort to train. So I'll give you a quick synopsis for anybody who has not done document understanding. So in the past, and by the past, I mean maybe 2 years ago, when you use document understanding, you could have done it in multiple different ways. And to start, it depends on the document you're handling. Now, if you think about structured documents, like a generic document that always gets the same layout, government documents, right? They always have the same layout. Those are considered structured. So structured documents would have a very easy templatized approach within document understanding. Let's talk about semi-structured. And what does it mean? So if we think about invoices that comes with different vendors, it would still be a structured invoice, but the structure won't be arbitrary across all vendors. Different vendors would have different layouts, right? So that would consider as semi-structured documents. Still, reasonable capability within a reasonable time if you want to develop and deploy that. The biggest challenge was identifying unstructured documents. And in my previous life, where I was a developer a couple of years ago, this took so much time and effort because unstructured documents could mean so many things, right? If we think about legal contracts or reports, agreements, handwriting documents that don't have any layout would fall under unstructured documents. And if you were a developer or even a business entity, you would know that that takes the most amount of time in developing a model for it to intelligently capture. Now, the IXP is an upgrade of document understanding where it leverages core generative AI capabilities. Now, if you use IXP, and I did a couple of IXP projects about 2 months ago, you would see that the time to deployment and the time to actually create that model is significantly faster, at least 10x. So if you haven't used IXP, I highly encourage you to do so because in my opinion, it's a game changer in how document understanding works. Why? Because we can save time and efficiency and gain efficiency with IXP. But my point here is, again, how generative AI gets implemented within every UiPath offering that it has. And document understanding is now getting a transformational journey with IXP, which is a generative extraction for unstructured and complex documents. That being said, let's explore what other offerings UiPath has. Now, this is not only within a document understanding framework, but UiPath has Gen AI pretty much everywhere. So you can see today, if you have autopilot, autopilot is literally everywhere where you can generate, you can prompt whatever process that you want, and autopilot would generate the process for you. So that is a capability with generative AI, not for a business front, but more of a developer and user front. And then you have UiPath Gen AI activities. This is an activity within Studio that a developer can use to call out multi-platform APIs, which means we previously discussed, how UiPath can integrate Azure OpenAI. It can integrate AWS Tech Stack, if anything that you need. So it's platform agnostic, and you can use Gen AI activities to call that. Solution accelerators. If you don't know what solution accelerator is, sorry, my terms are getting messed up. Solution accelerator is a pre-built package that you can download from UiPath. So if you're building something, I would highly encourage you to go to Solution Accelerator because you have pre-built studio developments that you can literally download online. And if I have time, I'm going to search that link and share it in chat. The goal is you can download those activity packages, you can modify them, you can change it. That saves a lot of time in development if you want to do it from scratch. UiPath Trust Layer. Now, just remember this because I'm going to talk a little bit extensively about that in the next couple of slides. Is that whenever you implement generative AI or even any AI capabilities, it comes with biases and limitations. And if you go into an operational mode, operationally, you need to think about how our data is being stored, secured, and used. So UiPath offers an AI trust layer, which guarantees that the data resides within the UiPath's core orchestrator and the data does not leak. So this would be important for security reasons, avoiding data leakage, and all of that fun stuff where it comes to operational stability within implementation, right? And within AI Trust Layer, there is something called context grounding, again, which I'm going to talk to you in a few moments. And we discussed document understanding, right? So as we discussed, we talked about how document understanding has a ton of Gen AI capabilities. And you can see that, you have the DocPath LLM, which is a UiPath built LLM. Within document understanding, we've got active learning, which is a training method where you can learn as you go. And by you, I mean the model. Generative extraction and generative validation. Now, these two, again, are activities within UiPath where you can extract and validate using a Gen AI model as opposed to a traditional machine learning model. And in the discipline of communication mining, you still have the Compath LLMs, which is another large language model created by UiPath specifically for communication mining. And you get zero-shot discovery. Remember how I previously talked about where you can use a LLM without training anything, and you can just call it, and maybe you can train over time or not. And that's what we talk with zero shot. Zero shot means we're not giving any training model, but we are just calling a model without any resources trained upon it. And then over time, the model will learn, right? And same with the Gen AI extraction, right? Same with communication mining, you still have generative AI extraction as well. And obviously the language support. This is a capability that UiPath had that spans across all offerings where it offers different language support and capability, and this goes for Gen AI as well. Okay, a little bit about the UiPath approach. You can see that generative AI is implemented everywhere, right? And I want to talk a little bit about generative AI and specialized AI. Why? Because when I got to know it, those two terms were a bit confusing to me because I thought specialized AI was a fancy word for Gen AI, but it's not. So UiPath uses these two terms very extensively, right? Gen AI and specialized AI. So what Gen AI is a standalone generative AI activity. We talked about, if we go to the previous slide, generative AI solutions, Gen AI activities, any of these would be within that generative AI bucket, right? Where the context is document, communication, you want to create a chatbot, all of that would be sole generative AI processes. But when we go to specialized AI, right? UI, API, human in the loop, more into the document understanding space where we use different components in collaboration with Gen AI. Document understanding, perfect example, because we use Gen AI, we use human in the loop, we use UI-based automation, IXP, all of those where generative AI is a component of the entire process. We would call that as a specialized AI process, right? As opposed to a Gen AI process. And both of these capabilities are supported by the AI trust layer, which is UiPath's umbrella for security and compliance. And a little bit about context grounding. Now, context grounding for UiPath. Let's go here. So what is context grounding? So remember how we talked in the very first slide, how generative AI can either be used by unsupervised learning or supervised learning. So context grounding is the principle where we, teach the model as we go. So you can see here, this is a UiPath slide, is that if we say Joe has questions around Gen AI at UiPath, right? It goes through the third-party LLM, and then it goes through these LLM responses. But if Joe has questions around Gen AI at UiPath, and then that model has the Gen AI security handbook trained, this third-party LLM is now not unsupervised learning. It has been trained with the Generative AI Security Handbook at UiPath. Now, because of that, you are no longer going to get generic responses. You will be getting more fine-tuned responses. For example, about the AI trust layer that we talked about, end-to-end service security, and all of these ideas. So essentially, in a nutshell, is that context grounding is us making a foundation on an already existing LLM and training it with our data. It's as simple as that, right? So going back to this, you can see, you can ingest and index. That essentially means we have a baseline model where we ingest that model and then we index it with our data. Now, once we do that, the term search and retrieve is us calling and prompting from that newly refined LLM. So these are, I want to say, AI-based terms. And if you have no idea about it, don't worry about it, because these essentially mean ingest and indexing means us context grounding an LLM with the data that we have, and then search and retrieve us prompting it, us asking questions and retrieving those answers. Now, within UiPath, right, there are some capabilities where context grounding does. You can ingest, which we talked about. Semantic similarity search, which is it finds similarities within language. By language, I mean how we talk and the context of the verbiage of something. For example, if we talk in a setting, if it's emotional, if it has different contexts, the semantic search, similarity search can identify similar search that goes there. RAG, retrieval augment generation, is another principle within context grounding, right? And just letting you know the art of the possible within UiPath. Okay, so context for Gen AI, again, we can go about this in many different ways, right? You can see here, one way is ingest and index and then search and retrieve. Or you can say, hey, this is an iterative loop, right? You have the context, you have the response, you have the query, and you can pass it, embed queries and get relevant context, parse, and iterative feedback. So essentially, it's the same thing, but you can showcase it in many different ways. All right. Now we need to, whenever we talk about AI, Gen AI, whatever it is, security, compliance, and AI goes hand in hand. I believe it's a partnership, and it's important if you implement it for you to know the AI constraints of it, right? Because whenever we train a model with our data, we need to make sure that that training does not go into open source, because it's important that we have our data within our own space. And that could be due to so many different reasons. If you're working in healthcare, finance, obviously it's going to be a huge um, organizational risk for your data to leak. So that's how UiPath has this AI trust layer. And whenever somebody, if you go into pre-sales conversations or even adoption conversations, and someone asks you, how is our data protected with UiPath? UiPath AI Trust Layer would be your base to go to, because this is UiPath's umbrella for generative AI governance. And it has all the governance compliance matrix for private, public sectors, um, that has, PII filtering, auditing, and more of the governance capabilities. So this way, even if you use a third party LLM to call, this UiPath AI Trust Layer has that security for UiPath products. Okay. So if you use, for example, if you use Azure, Azure has their own governance layer. So if you're calling Azure OpenAI model, you need to make sure that that governance layer is set up, which obviously for Azure, if you're using Azure OpenAI, it will have. But if you're using some kind of open source as a third party LLM, you need to make sure that governance is set up too. But within UiPath, and for all UiPath LLMs, the doc path, the com path, it is governed and trusted by the UiPath AI Trust Layer. And this would be not complete without talking about the disabilities of generative AI. Generative AI, even at this advanced stage where you see so many inoperabilities that and capabilities that get improved every single day, there are still risks. So whenever you go into deployment or scale, know that these limitations are still prevalent with the implementations that you do, right? So you can see here, and this is a draft that I took from UiPath, where you can still feel hallucinations. You can, handle input restrictions because there still is a tokenization limit. Data integrity, you can have, the model can be blibberish based on how you train it. And you can have stale content. So it's not perfect, but it's important to understand these limitations. And just like I mentioned, quick session today about generative AI and what it offers with UiPath. So that being said, I am going to look into Q&A because I saw a licensing question, which I really like to answer. And if you have any other questions, feel free to let me know, right? And I see one question is, which licensing works? Charita, thanks for letting me know. Which licensing works for a single developer to use Document Understanding and AI Center? Says says the usage is currently limited to run a small proof of concept. So if we go into Google, and I'm going to stop sharing the screen for a quick second, UiPath has their Gen AI licensing, which you can easily find out here. So once that's done, I can. So I'm going to share the screen and I'll share the link on chat too. All right, there we go. So this is UiPath's link for all things Gen AI. And this, if you can see my screen, you can see I'm just on this UiPath documentation page with integration service activities. Here you get context grounding that I just talked about and AI trust layer. You get the AI trust layer policy that we talked about. And then you get the licensing plan framework, right? So anything automation cloud, you have licensing information for Gen AI. And again, AI trust layer policies, you have all of those features for every single feature that UiPath has, apps, agents, IXP. You can see here the model compatibility, all of that, right? Wikas has asked, will AI Center be depreciated since IXP and DU Modern are introduced? I don't see that getting depreciated right now just because it's so new and we're just getting into adoption. But maybe in the next couple of years, it might be. I don't know. But I think IXP is great. And if you haven't used it as a developer or even as a business, you should look into that because that reduces time to, yeah, reduces the time to value. And it just increases the value with less time for development, right? Any other questions you might have, you can unmute yourself and you can ask about it. And if you don't have any questions, feel free to join our next session. It's going to be a working session, so definitely no slides. What we're going to do, it's going to be a basic studio session where we are going to create an out-of-the-box ML model, not with IXP, with traditional document understanding, just for those who want to create an out-of-the-box ML model and just identify how to train a document. So that would be a great session to attend on the 28th. And we get questions. Can we get some samples of IXP implementation, either in cloud, Studio Desktop, or Python code? Let's see. So let's see over here. You have UiPath is great with documentation, right? Yeah, anything that you go, you have their documentation on everything. And you can see here, this was updated 2 days ago. You can see how IXP is here in Orchestrator. You'll have to add that as a feature, but then you have here the licensing if you want to see the licensing and consumption. But to answer your question, can we get samples of IXP implementation? Probably the ones you have online. If this is something that you want, we can make note of it and hold a future event based on IXP where we can do another working session with IXP, right? How do we deploy it? And how fast can something be trained? So we will note that for the community and add that for one of our future events.
Okay, Sharon, can you add the URL for this in the chat?
Yes.
Just so people have easy access. Thanks.
There we go. All right, I think that's all the questions we have. I'll give like last 30 seconds for anybody who has a question. If not, thanks again for joining. I know this is probably some of you, it might be an early session, some of you a night session, but we as a community appreciate you for all the support every single time. We see a lot of engagement within our community. So the feedback is if anybody wants to host future events or talk about it, I'm going to put my email as well. If anyone wants to email me about any questions that you have, please do so. I'll be very happy to get some information out of you and just make sure what you want and see how we can make you successful. All right. Diana, Vino, that's it for today's session. Thanks again, guys, for joining. And we can call it off if nobody has any questions.
Yeah, thank you, Sharon and Vino, for hosting the session today and also for all of you attending. Also, just if you have any ideas of what you'd like to hear about in the future, just drop us a link and we'll try to make that happen. So thanks very much. Okay, enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks
Thanks,
all.
Emma. Talk soon. Thanks,
Have
Vino.
a good
Talk
one.
soon.